going to start with a children's story that is all about selfless love and a deep longing for relationship. And many of you know this story very, very well. It's called The Giving Tree. Yeah. For Nikki. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Once there was a tree, and she loved a little boy. And every day the boy would come, and he would gather her leaves and make them into crowns and play king of the forest. He would climb up her trunk and swing from her branches and eat apples. And they would play hide and go seek. I love that. And when he was tired, he would sleep in her shade. And the boy loved the tree very much. And the tree was happy. But time went by, and the boy grew older. And the tree was often alone. Then one day the boy came to the tree, and the tree said, "Come, boy, come and climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and eat apples and play in my shade and be happy." "I'm too big to climb and play," said the boy. "I want to buy things and have fun. I want some money. Can you give me some money?" "I'm sorry," said the tree, "but I have no money. I have only leaves and apples. Take my apples, boy, and sell them in the city. Then you will have money and you will be happy." And so the boy climbed up the tree and gathered her apples and carried them away. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time, and the tree was sad. And then one day the boy came back, and the tree shook with joy. And she said, "Come, boy, climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and be happy." "I'm too busy to climb trees," said the boy. "I want a house to keep me warm," he said. "I want a wife and I want children, and so I need a house. Can you give me a house?" "I have no house," said the tree. "The forest is my house. But you may cut off my branches and build a house. Then you will be happy." And so the boy cut off her branches and carried them away to build his house. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time. And when he came back, the tree was so happy she could hardly speak. "Come, boy," she whispered, "come and play." "I'm too old and sad to play," said the boy. "I want a boat that will take me far away from here. Can you give me a boat?" "Cut down my trunk and make a boat," said the tree. "Then you can sail away and be happy." And so the boy cut down her trunk and made a boat and sailed away. And the tree was happy, but not really. After a long time, the boy came back again. "I am sorry, boy," said the tree, "but I have nothing left to give you." "My apples are gone. My teeth are too weak for apples," said the boy. "My branches are gone," said the tree. "You cannot swing on them." "I'm too old to swing on branches," said the boy. "My trunk is gone," said the tree. "You cannot climb." "I'm too tired to climb," said the boy. "I'm so sorry," sighed the tree. "I wish that I could give you something, but I have nothing left. I am just an old stump. I am sorry." "I don't need very much now," said the boy. "Just a quiet place to sit and rest. I am very tired." "Well," said the tree, straightening herself up as much as she could. "Well, an old stump is good for sitting and resting. Come, boy, sit down, sit and rest." And the boy did. And the tree was happy. The end. Whew. Shel Silverstein. Now, for some reason, this little strange story is kind of powerful. Okay, in some ways, it kind of reminds me of our relationship with God. the intense desire of the tree to be in relationship, the willingness of the tree to sacrifice herself, just kind of resonates with me. There's something about this. I'm up here reading this thing and I'm like, hold it together, man. And I also kind of see myself in the boy. Like he's pretty selfish in this relationship. He tends to only come to the tree when he wants something. The tree wants a relationship. That's all. The tree wants a relationship. The boy mostly wants the tree to solve his problems. He wants money, so he takes and sells the tree's apple. He wants a house, so he cuts off the tree's branches. He wants a boat, so he cuts down the tree altogether. This is, I don't know if you've noticed this is kind of a one-sided relationship. The tree gives, and the boy takes. And the boy really sets the terms for this relationship. The tree wants the relationship so badly that she allows the boy to dictate to her all the terms of the relationship. And I think as human beings, there's someone about us who kind of likes this story, and we kind of like the terms of this relationship. Because we like to dictate the terms of our relationships. And I discovered this powerfully in the 3rd grade. I was an 8-year-old in Mrs. Haskell's class, and I had my first crush. And her name was Brenda Epstein. And I would sit in class, man, I wish she would be mine. I wish she would pledge her undying devotion to me. And so one day, I got up the nerve to send her a little note, and it said, "Will you go with me?" And to make the decision simple for her, I put in 2 little boxes. Yes and no. And when she gave it back, like I couldn't open it fast enough, like my hands were all sweaty, my heart's beating. Did she mark yes or no? And guess what? Brenda added a 3rd box. Any of you guess what it said? Maybe. So at recess, I tracked her down, and I said, hey, what do you mean maybe? And so she explained. She said she had this best friend named Nancy Jakanovich. And Nancy would feel left out if Brenda and I were exclusive. So Brenda would be my girlfriend if, okay, and here were the terms of the relationship, if Nancy could be my girlfriend too. So we were an item. All 3 of us. So the next skating party at the skate deck, during the couples skate, I went around with 2 girls, one on each hand. And then at Christmas time, things really escalated to the next level. And you know how a lot of schools have like a Santa shop? You know what I'm talking about? This cheap little place where someone dresses up like Santa and you can go and buy cheap little gifts to sell somebody, and it's a fundraiser or whatever. So I go into the Santa shop, and I bought rings for Brenda and Nancy. And the volunteer lady at the Santa shop was like, "Oh, that's so sweet. Did you save this money yourself?" And I'm like, "Mm-hmm." She said, "That's so sweet. Are these for your mom and your grandma?" "No, these are for my girlfriends." So Brenda and Nancy wore my rings for a week. And then something happened. I don't even know what it was. But this relationship was complicated. And so something happened along the way, and they got really mad at me, and they broke up with me. And just to express the full extent of their hatred for me, they took my Santa shop rings out in the woods and they just threw them. It's crushing. I'm still not really over it. But looking back, I've realized that really that relationship had no chance. Because the relationship was sort of doomed from the start, because 3 people doesn't really work unless you live in Utah. And so I was 8 at the time, and I'm now 40, and I've had 32 years to think about and just ponder, what should I have done differently? And I've concluded that I should have negotiated better terms. Like if I knew then what I know now, if I was as mature then and articulate then as I am now, I would have said something like this. You know, Brenda, you're a beautiful girl, and I think you're pretty smart too. Like you already know most of your times tables, and you're like a finalist in the spelling bee. But I have to be honest with you. As much as my heart is inclined toward you, and as much as I admire your loyalty to your best friend, I just think it's way too complicated to do what you're proposing. I think that to properly cultivate a romantic love interest between the heart of a man and the heart of a woman, it has to be exclusive in nature. So as much as I am drawn to you by forces that I do not understand, I find the terms of this relationship unacceptable. It's either you alone or nothing, baby. Now, here's what I've noticed. We live in a world where we're constantly negotiating the terms of our relationships. Like we do it in the dating world with boyfriends or girlfriends. We sit down to have the DTR, the big determine the relationship talk. Where is this thing going and what is our understanding here? What are the terms? We do it with our friends. Like, are you my bestie or are you not my bestie? We do it in marriage. Who's going to do what around here? We do it with our employers. We do it with our employees. We like to dictate the terms of our relationships. But there is one relationship, and I think you can all see where I'm going with this. There is one relationship where we do not get to dictate the terms. When it comes to our relationship with God, we either come on His terms or we don't come to Him at all. And sometimes I think we like to kind of think of God as our own personal giving tree. We want to dictate all the terms of the relationship. God, I will come to you and I will be with you if you answer all my questions, if you fix this thing in my life, if you take care of this problem. God, I'll come to you if you answer my prayer. God, I'll come when you meet my terms in my way. But the truth is, if we're going to have a relationship with God, we have to come to Him on His terms. This is week number 4 of this series called It's Personal. And so for 4 weeks, we've been talking about the reality, this incredible reality that God, more than anything else, wants a relationship with you and me. More than anything else, He's looking for people that will love Him and will trust Him and will walk with Him. And so this morning, we're going to look at a very famous initiation of a relationship in the Bible. And we're going to see God come to a man on God's terms and invite this man into a relationship, like a deep, vibrant relationship. A relationship that would be built on trust and faith. And these are God's terms, like trust and obedience. These are the terms of God's relationship. And these are the same terms that God is offering to you and me. Okay, now here's the background for this morning's story. God had created the world and He created all the people, but the world had forgotten God, like the entire world. The world, as it has a tendency to do, had completely drifted from God. The world had sort of, along the way, created its own version of God. And there was all kinds of confusion about God, and nobody was really walking with God. People sort of viewed God as like this cosmic vending machine. And what you had to do was like figure out how many quarters to put in or the type of code that you had to punch to get what you wanted. Like to turn off that blinking in the back right now. It's got to be a code somebody can punch in. Dale's on it. You're back with me. A more polished speaker would ignore that. So all over the world, with this cosmic vending machine picture of God, people were doing crazy stuff. They're sacrificing animals. They're sacrificing their children. They're sacrificing infants. They're sacrificing themselves. They're cutting themselves. They're pleading with God. They're burning things. They're performing these elaborate religious ceremonies, like whatever they can think of. They did all of these things trying to get God or the gods to do whatever they wanted God or the gods to do. We need God to bless our crops. So how do we get him to do that? And someone would come along and say, well, look, I think if you do these 3 things, God will bless your crops. And they'd go, okay, we'll try that. Or somebody come along and say, oh, I need children. I'm having trouble getting pregnant. And somebody would come along and say, well, here's what you do to get God to give you more children. And the world was full of all this superstition. And the world was full of all kinds of different religious ideas. Families all had their own family gods. Each piece of real estate had its own god kind of overseeing it. Each nation had its own god. Each village had its own god. Each city had its own god. And people taught that if you worshiped the right gods in the right way, then you could get the gods to do whatever you want. And in some ways, to be honest with you, as absurd as that is, in the Christian community, things haven't really changed that much. I think we're still tempted to try to bargain with God. There's something in us that wants to say, God, here are my terms. Here's the way it works. God, here's what I expect for you to do for me if I do for you. And so, God, let's sit down at my bargaining table and see if we can work out a deal. Let's see if we can work out an agreeable arrangement. But our relationship with God comes on his terms. It doesn't come on our terms. And 4,000 years ago, in the middle of all of this confusion about God, in the middle of all these religious ideas and practices, God comes to a man named Abram, later Abraham, and he essentially says, Abraham, I want the world to know who I am. I want the world to know me. I want the world to walk with me. I want to invite the entire world back to me. And here's the thing. I want to use you and your descendants to do it. And Abraham's going, that sounds pretty cool, God. But I don't have any descendants. In fact, more than anything else in the world, my wife and I have wanted children. But we're old, and we have missed our window. I don't know if you know how this works, God, but my wife, she's beyond the childbearing years. Okay? Now don't get me wrong. God, things are good in the romance area. Okay? But there are no descendants, and it's too late. And so God says, trust me, I know all about that. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to pack up your wife and your servants and all of your herds and animals, and I want you to move away and leave behind all of your extended family. And the implication is, I want you to leave behind your household idols and gods. Leave behind all of your preconceptions about religion and spirituality and God. I want you to do something new in the world, Abraham, and I'm starting with you. Okay, so let's look at this. Genesis chapter 12. Verses 1 to 3. The Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. In other words, Abraham, I'm going to do something to reach out to the whole world, but I'm going to start with one person, and that one person is you. Abraham, I'm going to bless you with descendants, and those descendants are going to become a nation. They're going to become a special nation that knows me and that walks with me. And through that nation, all peoples on earth are going to be invited back to me. And make no mistake about it, okay, I'm coming to you on my terms. Here are my terms. And that's kind of it for a while. But Abraham does what God said. And he and his wife, they pack up all their stuff, they pack up all their servants and all their herds, and they move far away from his family. And time continues to go by. It goes by, and it goes by, and it goes by, and there's no children. And Abraham and Sarah, they were old to start with, and they're not getting any younger, and time is just ticking away. Her biological clock isn't ticking. It's dead. Then they come to Abraham, or God comes to Abraham again, in chapter 15, because his time just keeps going by, and God renews his promise. Okay, chapter 15, verse 5. He took him outside. God took Abraham outside and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." Then he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." Now we can kind of like gloss over that, but imagine you're Abraham. Like, he's old, and his wife is old, and at this point they have 0 children. And they've lived long lives, and they've had a long marriage. And more than anything else, more than getting wealthier or anything else, they just want to have kids. And they had probably done everything that they knew to do. They had tried everything according to the customs and the superstitions of their people. They tried everything that people had said. Here's what you do in order for God to give you a child or children. They had tried all of that, and none of it had worked. And yet all around them, people are having children. Their friends are having children. Their servants are having children. And they're watching children playing all over the place. Sarah's probably getting invited to baby showers. And they're so frustrated. And they feel so helpless. And here comes God again, talking to Abraham about descendants, talking to Abraham about his legacy. And in that moment, Abraham must have thought to himself, like, okay, but God, we don't have a single offspring. And this is a promise you've made before, and still, here we are. It's a long time from the last time I talked to you, and there's nothing. Like, where are you? Like, where have you been? Why haven't you answered our prayers? We've wanted this one thing more than anything, and now, God, it's too late. So, like, can you imagine how painful this was for him? Can you imagine like all the questions that he had? Which is exactly why his response to all of this is so amazing. Listen to this. Genesis chapter 15, verse 6. Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Now, I don't know about you, but for me it's like, well, wait a minute. Abraham, you can't just like believe. I mean, aren't there some questions? I mean, don't you have questions like, well, wait a minute, God, how? And where have you been? And what about? But it says Abraham believed God and that God credited it to him as righteousness. Righteousness just means a right standing with God. So in this moment, as a result of Abraham's faith, God is giving him a right standing with him. Now think of this, like in this moment, there's no Bible. There's no scripture. There's no commandments yet. There's no church. There's just Abraham and a conversation with God. And we're told that Abraham believed God, trusted God, and he entered into a right standing with God. God essentially says to him, Abraham, as a testimony to the rest of this world, and to get this process started of inviting the world back to me, I'm going to give you as a gift a right standing with me. Not because of anything you've done, but because you made a decision. Like with all the questions you must have, you made a decision to simply trust me. And guys, that is all that God is looking for. You think about all the questions that Abraham must have had, God, why now? Like, why didn't you do this earlier? Like, why have you allowed my wife to go through the humiliation and the depression and the rage? And there was like that one time when she was late and we thought, maybe. Like, why couldn't you have delivered then? Like, why did you make us watch our friends and our servants and our neighbors all play with their kids? Well, we didn't have any. Like, why now? Why not sooner? And while I'm at it, like God, now and that I'm on a roll, like I got a bunch of other questions. Like how come there's so much disease? And how come there's so much poverty? And how come there's so much sickness? And how come there's so much cruelty like all over this world? Like God, I got some questions. But Abraham had no answers for any of that. In that moment, when God came to Abraham and said, look, I'm coming to you on my terms. Now I want you to respond to me on my terms. I know you have questions. I know you have things you don't understand. But I just want you to believe me. I just want you to trust me. And Abraham did. He trusted God. And eventually, in God's own timing, in his own way, he honored his promise. And eventually, the nation of Israel was formed, and out of that nation came a man named Jesus. And the moral of the story with Abraham is a simple one. God comes to men and women and teenagers and children on his terms. And the very personal relationship that God has with any of us, the very nature of that relationship always begins on his terms, not ours. One time the disciples, they come to Jesus with a question. Jesus has been teaching all about the kingdom of God, the coming of the kingdom of God. And for the most part, the disciples were totally confused. Like, they thought that this kingdom was going to happen physically in their world. They thought that at some point, Jesus would call on the angels or the power of God or something, and he would raise up an army, and they would overthrow the entire Roman Empire. And so every time Jesus talked about the kingdom and the coming of the kingdom, they had visions of earthly palaces and all of this power and all of this prestige and all of this stuff. And of course, they would be in the king's inner circle. And in their Jewish culture, a person's rank was really, really important. Jesus had already taught that there would be some people in the kingdom that would be called great, and there would be other people in the kingdom that would be called the least. And the disciples, as human as they were looking around at each other wondering, okay, when this all goes down, where am I going to stack up? And this question was fueled by lots of other stuff. Like just recently, Peter, James, and John had gone on a trip with Jesus, and they went up a mountain, and they saw incredible stuff that they weren't allowed to talk about. And the other disciples weren't invited. Now, when they got back, and they wouldn't talk about what went on, I imagine the other disciples felt a little weird about that. And Jesus has been talking about the reality that he's going to die. So I kind of wonder if the disciples were thinking, when King Jesus dies, someone else will have to become king. And he's not married, and he doesn't have any kids. I wonder who that would be. Peter? Good question, John. And I'm guessing that no one really spoke this out loud, but maybe they wondered, hey, who might that be? So they come to Jesus with an extremely relevant and to them, very important question. They want to know the hierarchy. This is Matthew chapter 18, verse 1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" You imagine the drama of this moment. This is not a time, if you're one of the disciples and sometimes Jesus teaches and you kind of get just sort of fade, this is not a time to fade out. You have to imagine the drama of this moment. They're expecting Jesus to name a name. Maybe it would be a beauty contest. Jesus would go, well, the fifth runner-up is, just sort of work his way down. They don't know what Jesus is going to say. But imagine the anticipation. They're on pins and needles, and so here's what happens. Verse 2. Okay, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. So they're all leaning forward for the answer. And Jesus says hey, little buddy. Yeah, you right there. How about you come over here for a second? I know you're kind of shy and everything, but come over here for a second. And the disciples are going, excuse us for a second, little boy. We're in the middle of a very important conversation with Jesus. Jesus, maybe you didn't hear the question. Maybe we weren't very clear. We'll repeat it. Who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? And so with the little boy standing right there, this is what happens. And he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is saying, guys, it's all about humility. It's all about trust. It just comes down to this: trust God. Let him lead you where he wants you to go. Do what he tells you. Trust him like the way a 5-year-old trusts a parent. Trust that he knows more than you. Trust that he knows better than you. Trust that he loves you and he wants good things for you. And even if things don't make perfect sense to you, even if he's asking you to do something that's confusing to you, he knows what he's doing. Trust him. Stop resisting him and let him lead you. Just trust him. And here's what I think, kind of in part, Jesus is getting at. Built into us is like this resistance to God. At times, we're all resistant to God. And built into that resistance is sort of this subtle thread of pride. It's a thread of pride that just sort of runs through us. And if we were to peel back the layers, the pride kind of looks like this. God, you owe me. You owe me. You owe me an explanation for why you let that happen in my life. God, you owe me. You owe me an answer for my prayer. I've been faithful to you. Well, mostly faithful. Well, I haven't killed anybody. And I go to church and stuff. So you owe me. You owe me that job. You owe me the pregnancy. You owe me that romantic relationship. You owe me a better house. You owe me a better career. You owe me better health. You owe it to me to sit at my bargaining table and agree to my terms for our relationship. I have stuff I want, and as far as I can see, it's really good stuff. And so you just give that to me, and I'll follow you. How about those terms? But see, God doesn't really operate like that. If we want a relationship with him, we have to come to him on his terms. And his terms are this: I love you more than you can possibly imagine. I love you so much that I sent my son to die a sacrificial death to set you free from your guilt and your sin and your past. To set you free to be filled with my Holy Spirit so that you could see and hear and understand things that you were missing, that were going right over your head. And I'm offering to walk through your life with you, even though you won't perceive me all the time. And I'm offering, if you trust and walk with me, to pour my blessing out on you. And if we want to have a relationship with him, we have to come on his terms. His terms are this: trust me. Walk with me. Go where I lead you, even when you don't understand it. And he says, and here's the other end of the deal: I will bless you. I'll bless you. And so we look at that and we say, oh, okay, you'll bless me. How? What does that blessing look like? Exactly. Because I really want a job. Does the blessing include the job? Will you hook me up with my soulmate? I'm having trouble. Is this going to include a really hot soulmate? Is that part of the blessing? God, how exactly are you going to bless me? Will you make me smart and successful and liked and admired by everybody? How exactly will you bless me? God, let's talk about a little bit more about the terms of this deal. And God says, no, you're just going to have to trust me. If you want a relationship, it's going to be on my terms. I will bless you. I will bless you. Your job is to trust me. And here's something else. If you trust me and come to me on these terms, here's what I'll tell you for sure. One day, when this life is a distant memory, you and I are going to see each other face to face. And you'll understand things that you don't understand right now. So for now, you just have to trust me. I want a relationship with you. I want to lead you, but you have to trust me. And these are the terms. And so the question that every one of us is facing is simply this. Like, will I back away from the negotiating table and just trust him? Am I willing to come to him on his terms? Will I trust that maybe God knows what he's doing? That maybe there are things that I just can't know or can't understand right now? Because maybe you're here this morning, and if you're honest, you think about your relationship with God, and it looks a little bit like the relationship between the boy and the giving tree. You come to him when you've got a problem, when you need help, when there's something in your life you can't get for yourself and you need God to do something. And you want to know, kind of as you think about life with him, okay, but what's in this for me? Exactly. And I just want to say, what if God is trying to do something in your life that is so deep and so beautiful, but it doesn't necessarily involve you getting everything you want? What if the main point, really, of all of this in the end is just him? What if at the end, the big prize, the big blessing, is just him? It's not everything you want him to do. It's just him. And what if that turns out actually to be far more beautiful than anything you've ever imagined? What if that turns out to be way bigger than all the stuff you want? What if, you meet him face to face one day, and in that moment, suddenly, it all makes sense? And his love for you and everlasting life with him is actually better than anything you've ever dreamed of. What if he's the prize?